Just think about this for a second. The British Empire once controlled a quarter of the entire planet's landmass and ruled over a fifth of its population. It was a global superpower unlike anything the world had ever seen. So, how did a small island nation pull that off? And what does its legacy really mean for us today? That's the story we're going to dig into. So that leads us to the big question, right? How on earth did one small, kind of rainy island off the coast of Europe manage to build the largest empire in all of human history? Well, the answer doesn't start with some grand strategy or a huge battle. Nope, it starts with the land itself. You see, if you want to project power all over the world, you first have to have a secure home base. And for Britain, its geography, well, it was the ultimate natural defense. It basically insulated it from all the constant chaos happening with its neighbors. Now, what's really amazing here isn't just one of these things. It's how they all came together. You've got the English Channel, which is basically a giant natural moat, making invasion incredibly difficult. The climate was just right, what you might call a Goldilocks climate, perfect for supporting a growing population with tons of fertile land. And its location? It was the perfect sweet spot, close enough to Europe to get rich from trade, but just far enough away to stay out of a lot of their endless wars. This unique setup gave them the security and the resources they needed to start looking outward. Okay, so with that secure foundation locked in, Britain turned its gaze to the rest of the world, and its rise to power was fueled by this really potent mix of naval dominance, smart colonization, and some seriously aggressive economic moves. And this timeline, wow, it really shows just how fast this all happened. In 1588, they defeat the Spanish Armada, which pretty much establishes them as a major sea power. Just 2 decades later, bam, they've got a permanent colony in America. Soon after that, the East India Company kicks off its massive commercial push into Asia. The Act of Union in 1707 was huge. It consolidated power at home, creating Great Britain. And get this, by 1713, a treaty handed them a monopoly on the transatlantic slave trade, a horrific but incredibly profitable enterprise. Each of these steps built on the last, creating a truly global empire. So by the time we get to the 19th century, this whole process just hits its absolute peak. I mean, British power was completely unparalleled. Its empire was so gigantic that it got that famous nickname, the empire on which the sun never sets. Let that sink in for a minute. 25%? That's not just a number. That's an area larger than the entire continent of Africa. From the huge territories in Canada all the way to the resource-rich lands of India and South Africa, the British Empire was operating on a planetary scale. And this quote from a British diplomat at the time, man, it just perfectly captures the mindset of the era. The sun never sets wasn't just literally true, it also showed this deep-seated belief they had in their own limitless potential. And, their right to just keep expanding. So what was the engine that powered this whole machine? Well, it was this incredible self-feeding system. You had the Industrial Revolution, which was born right there in Britain, providing all the new technology. The colonies were the source of all the raw materials, like cotton and sugar. The Royal Navy was the muscle, the armed enforcer protecting trade routes all over the world. And a huge part of this wealth was built on the back of the transatlantic slave trade, a brutal and hugely profitable system that provided the forced labor that made so many of these colonial ventures work. And this period of just total dominance got a name, Pax Britannica, which is just Latin for the British peace. For about 100 years after the Napoleonic Wars, Britain basically acted as the world's policeman. It used its incredible economic and military power to keep the balance in Europe, making sure no other country could challenge its global trade. It was a time of relative peace, sure, but it was a peace kept in place by the world's biggest superpower. But, as we all know, no empire lasts forever. And for Britain, the beginning of the end came from a pretty unexpected place, a war it actually helped win, the First World War. Just look at this comparison. It shows so clearly why the world wars were absolutely devastating for the empire. They completely shattered the foundations of British power. The cost was astronomical, draining the treasury and leaving Britain deep in debt to the United States. Its naval supremacy, gone. The economic and military power that held the whole thing together had just evaporated. And suddenly the calls for independence from its colonies became impossible to ignore. And that's the real kicker here, the ultimate irony. Britain was on the winning side of both world wars, but the price of victory was its empire. Financially broken and totally overshadowed by the United States, the era of British global dominance was officially over. Okay, so the empire is long gone, but its legacy? It's everywhere, and it's shaping the United Kingdom in some really profound ways today. In fact, you can draw a straight line from the struggles of finding a new post-imperial identity to the deep divisions that are threatening to pull the Union apart right now, from Brexit to new calls for independence within its own borders. Take the 2016 Brexit vote. I mean, that was a truly seismic event. For a lot of people who voted to leave, it was really about reclaiming a sense of national sovereignty, kind of like an echo of a time when Britain stood on its own. But the decision to leave the European Union has had some major economic consequences, and it's really highlighted the deep political fractures inside the United Kingdom. And you can see those fractures showing up all over the place. In Scotland, which voted big time to stay in the EU, Brexit has poured gasoline on the fire for another independence vote. In Northern Ireland, new trade rules have kicked off the complex debate about Irish unification all over again. And all of this is happening while the UK is facing some serious economic headwinds, which puts the future of the Union itself into question. And all of this brings us to one final, really crucial thought. The British Empire, it was eventually toppled by outside forces, right? World wars, the rise of new superpowers. But the challenge the UK faces today, it's coming from the inside. And that leaves us with a big question. Can this centuries-old union actually survive the incredibly complex legacy of its own empire?